Bizarre experiments that pushed ethical boundaries, the human mind has always been drawn to the forbidden, the shadowy territories where knowledge and transgression intertwine. Welcome to today's journey into the unsettling realm of scientific experimentation gone awry. I'm your guide through this labyrinth of ethical quandaries, where brilliant minds crossed invisible lines in pursuit of understanding. Today, we delve into experiments that exist in that twilight zone between scientific breakthrough and moral catastrophe, studies that would never receive approval today, yet whose results continue to haunt and inform our understanding of humanity. Before we descend into these ethical abysses, it's worth noting that modern scientific research operates under strict ethical guidelines. Institutional review boards scrutinize methodologies. Informed consent is paramount. The welfare of subjects, human or animal, is protected by layers of oversight. But it wasn't always so. The very protocols that protect us now were often written in response to the violations we'll explore today, ethical boundaries inscribed in the aftermath of transgression. Our first venture takes us to Stanford University, 1971. A young psychology professor named Philip Zimbardo created an artificial prison in the basement of the psychology building. 24 male students were randomly assigned roles as prisoners or guards in what was planned as a 2-week simulation. The basement was transformed into a miniature penitentiary, complete with barred doors and claustrophobic cells. Prisoners wore chains and numbered smocks, while guards donned khaki uniforms and mirrored sunglasses that masked their eyes. The stage was set for what would become one of psychology's most infamous experiments. What happened next defied all expectations. Within days, mere days, the artifice became reality. Guards embraced their authority with escalating cruelty. They forced prisoners to clean toilet bowls with bare hands, deprived them of sleep, and subjected them to humiliating punishments. The Stanford prison experiment revealed the disquieting ease with which ordinary people adopt and execute roles of dominance or submission. It suggested that situational forces can overwhelm individual personality traits and moral compasses. But at what cost was this knowledge gained? Participants suffered genuine psychological distress. The distinction between experiment and reality dissolved. And perhaps most troublingly, Zimbardo himself became so immersed in his role as prison superintendent that he failed to intervene as abuses mounted, until his graduate assistant, Christina Maslach, confronted him about the moral implications of what was unfolding. Just a decade earlier, another psychologist had peered into similar depths of human nature. In the shadow of World War II, as the world grappled with the Holocaust, Yale professor Stanley Milgram posed a haunting question. Could ordinary Americans commit atrocities if ordered by authority figures? His experimental design was deceptively simple. Participants, believing they were part of a study on memory and learning, were instructed to administer increasingly powerful electric shocks to a learner, actually an actor, each time they answered questions incorrectly. The control panel before them indicated voltage levels from 15 volts, slight shock, to 450 volts, XXX danger, severe shock. As the experiment progressed, the learner would plead for mercy, complain of heart problems, and eventually fall silent, suggesting unconsciousness or worse. If participants hesitated, the experimenter would simply state, "The experiment requires that you continue." The results were chilling. Approximately 65% of participants administered the maximum shock, despite clear signs of distress from the supposed victim. They obeyed not out of sadism, but from deference to scientific authority and the diffusion of responsibility that accompanies hierarchical structures. The ethical quandaries here are manifold. Participants were deceived about the nature of the study. Many experienced extreme stress, conflict, and lasting doubts about themselves. Some defenders argue the knowledge gained justified these transgressions, revealing mechanisms behind atrocities from Nazi death camps to the My Lai massacre. Yet one must ask, does understanding the darkness within us require inflicting genuine psychological trauma? Is knowledge itself always an absolute good, regardless of how it's obtained? We next turn to a study so troubling it became known simply as the monster study. In 1939, University of Iowa speech pathologist Wendell Johnson and his graduate student Mary Tudor conducted an experiment on 22 orphan children. Their hypothesis concerned the origins of stuttering. Could speech disorders be induced through suggestion and negative reinforcement? The orphans, vulnerable, dependent, with nowhere else to go, provided the perfect test subjects. The children were divided into two groups. Those in the control group received positive speech therapy and praise for their verbal fluency. The experimental group experienced something far darker. Even those speaking normally were criticized, belittled, and told they were developing stutters. "Watch your speech," they were constantly warned. "You're beginning to stutter." The psychological assault was relentless, targeted at children already abandoned by society. The consequences were devastating and enduring. Many children in the experimental group developed genuine speech problems. Some became selectively mute, speaking only when absolutely necessary. Others struggled with self-confidence and communication skills throughout their lives. 60 years later, in 2001, the University of Iowa issued a public apology as surviving participants were awarded a collective $925,000 in compensation. But can financial restitution truly address decades of communicative impairment and psychological damage? From academic institutions, we now turn to government programs, specifically the Central Intelligence Agency's Project MKUltra. Beginning in the early 1950s, at the height of Cold War paranoia, this clandestine program sought methods of mind control, interrogation enhancement, and behavior modification. The experiments were conducted in universities, hospitals, and prisons across America and Canada. Many subjects had no idea they were part of a study at all, unwitting participants in a government program testing the boundaries of consciousness and control. The techniques employed were as varied as they were disturbing. LSD administration without consent, hypnosis, sensory deprivation, verbal and sexual abuse, and various forms of psychological torture. Some subjects were terminal cancer patients dosed with radiation beyond ethical limits. Others were psychiatric patients subjected to psychic driving. Repetitive message loops played during drug-induced comas. Perhaps most infamous were the experiments conducted by psychiatrist Ewan Cameron at Montreal's Allen Memorial Institute. Funded by the CIA, Cameron attempted to depattern patients through electroshock treatments 30 to 40 times more intense than the medical standard, followed by weeks or months of drug-induced sleep. The program operated for over 2 decades before congressional investigations in the 1970s exposed its existence. By then, CIA Director Richard Helms had ordered most records destroyed, leaving the full scope of MKUltra forever shrouded in mystery and redacted documents. What we do know is that numerous lives were shattered. Some victims lost their memories. Others developed chronic anxiety, depression, or psychosis. The violation was comprehensive: of bodily autonomy, of informed consent, of the doctor-patient relationship, and of the fundamental right to cognitive liberty. Our final case study may be the most prolonged ethical violation in American medical history, the Tuskegee syphilis study. From 1932 to 1972, 40 years, the U.S. Public Health Service tracked the progression of untreated syphilis in 399 African American men from Macon County, Alabama. The participants, mostly impoverished sharecroppers with limited education, were told they were receiving treatment for bad blood, a local term encompassing various ailments. In reality, they received no effective care, even after penicillin became the standard treatment for syphilis in 1947. Researchers went to extraordinary lengths to ensure the men remained untreated. They provided aspirin and iron supplements as placebos. They interfered when other physicians attempted to treat the subjects. They even tracked participants who moved away to ensure they didn't receive treatment elsewhere. As the disease progressed, the men suffered blindness, mental deterioration, heart disease, and other severe complications. Many transmitted syphilis to their wives, who in turn bore children with congenital syphilis. All while doctors meticulously documented their decline, human beings transformed into specimens for observation. The study finally ended in 1972 when whistleblower Peter Buxton, leaked its details to the press. The subsequent public outrage led to major reforms in human subject research. In 1997, President Clinton formally apologized to the surviving participants and their families, calling the study deeply, profoundly, morally wrong. The Tuskegee study exemplifies how scientific racism, paternalism, and utilitarian ethics can combine to justify unconscionable violations of human dignity. It reveals the dangers when researchers view certain populations as less deserving of ethical consideration than others. As we emerge from these ethical shadowlands, what insights do we carry back into the light? Each of these studies, Stanford, Milgram, the Monster Study, MKUltra, Tuskegee, contributed something to our understanding of human behavior, authority, speech pathology, consciousness, or disease progression. Yet each also demonstrates how easily the pursuit of knowledge can become untethered from ethical moorings. How the laboratory can become a site of genuine harm when scientific curiosity operates without moral constraint. These transgressions catalyze the development of research ethics as we know it today. The Nuremberg Code, the Declaration of Helsinki, the Belmont Report, each emerged from recognition that science without ethical boundaries contains the seeds of its own corruption. Modern safeguards include mandatory informed consent, the right to withdraw from studies without penalty, the minimization of risks to participants, and oversight by independent ethical review boards. The price of these protections was paid by those whose stories we've explored today. And yet, the tension remains. Scientific progress sometimes pushes against ethical constraints. New technologies, genetic engineering, brain-computer interfaces, artificial intelligence, raise novel questions about consent, personhood, and acceptable risk. As we navigate these emerging frontiers, the bizarre experiments of the past serve not as relics of a less enlightened age, but as ever-present warnings of what can happen when we value discovery above dignity, knowledge above consent, and scientific advancement above human welfare. The most profound lesson may be this: true scientific progress cannot be measured solely by what we learn, but also by how we learn it, and at what cost to our shared humanity.